A lot of people get confused with the unit circle and how it's related to the right triangles. If you just understand that the cosine of every angle is the x-coordinate, the sine of every angle is the y-coordinate, you actually have all of the information you need for every 30-degree angle, 45, 60, and 90-degree angle. So the first thing I've done is I've marked on quadrant 1 to 4, which is our first 0-degree angle. At the top of the y-axis, we have between quadrant 1 and 2. On the negative x-axis, which is between quadrants 2 and 3, and on the negative y-axis, which is between quadrants 3 and 4. Every one of these on the unit circle, the unit circle has a radius equal to 1. So each of these is 1 unit away. So assuming that we started with 1 ray here, this is an angle of 0 degrees. A 0-degree angle, a trick is take your angle multiplied by pi and divide it by 180. That's what it is in radians. So 0 times pi over 180 is also 0 pi radians. This is 1 unit to the right, up 0, so it is the coordinate 1, 0. 1 is the cosine, 0 is the sine, or the x, y value. And although it's not here, it's the opposite of 90. Now, this is a 90-degree angle. If I drew this line here, there's my right angle. So this is 90 degrees. 90 divided by 180 is 1/2. So 90 over 180 is 1/2, or in terms of radians, pi over 2. So this is the same as pi over 2. And with it being a distance of 1 from the origin, it has gone up 1, but over 0. So the cosine of 90 is 0, which we know from down here to be true. And the sine of 90, which is the y value, is 1. So there's the cosine and sine of 90. If I were to make a straight line, that's 180 degrees. That's the same as a reflection of 0 across the origin. And I know that this coordinate is at -1, 0. The cosine of 180 and the sine of 180. 180 divided by 180 is 1, so we call this guy pi. 270 degrees is a 90, a 90, and a 90, which puts me right here on the negative y-axis. This coordinate is an x-axis reflection, and I would take this and say I've moved over 0 and down 1, which is the cosine and sine of 270 degrees. If I were to come back to a circle, well, this is 0 pi. 360 divided by, let me go back to 270. 270 divided by 180 is 3/2 times pi. Or it's 1, 2, 3 90s, which is why it's 3 halves. 3/2. 180 is 2 halves, or 1. 360 is 1, 2, 3, 4 90s. 4 90s, or 4 halves, is 2. So that's one quick and simple way of just noting every 90-degree move around my quadrants. Next, I can say, in terms of my x-axis, that's always when we want to measure the angle. If I were to take this angle, which is 30 degrees, 30 degrees divided by 180 is 1/6. So anything that is divisible by pi over 6 or 1/6 that cannot be reduced, like for example 2 pi over 6 would not count because that reduces to 1/3, which is a 60-degree reference. Every 30-degree angle is going to have this y and x value because it's the cosine and sine. So 30 degrees, which is pi over 6, is radical 3 over 2 for the cosine, or the x, 1/2 the sine, or the y value. Now, I measure these reference angles from the x-axis. So 30 degrees from 180 is 150 degrees. So 30 degrees, 1, 2, which would be 60, 3 would be 90, 4 would be 120, 5 would be 150. Or I can just do 150 divided by 180, and I would get 5 pi over 6. Now, one of the things I know about my quadrants, in quadrant 1, x and y are both positive. In quadrant 2, my x values are negative, and my y values are positive. So what this tells me is in this quadrant, all of my cosine or x values are negative. All of my sine or y values are positive. In quadrant number 3, x and y are both negative, so every cosine and sine will therefore be negative. If I were to divide them, because remember the tangent is dividing x and y, that would be positive. And last, in quadrant 4, this is a positive x, negative y. And x being the cosine, y being the sine, would be positive, negative here. So 150 is 5 pi over 6. I just look at the 30-degree numbers and I say that's negative, that's positive because of the quadrant that I'm in. So this would be negative radical 3 over 2, positive 1/2. Going from 180, I would say that's adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 30 degrees, which is 210. And that is 7 pi over 6. It has the exact same x and y, but down here they're both negative. So negative radical 3 over 2, negative 1/2. And my last 30-degree angle is 330, which divided by 180 is 11 pi over 6. Positive x value or cosine, negative sine value. If you know the 30s, the 60s are all the same, just the cosine and sine have flip-flopped. And all of the 45s are the exact same value. The only difference is, based on the quadrant you're in, both radical 2's would be positive. The cosine, or the x value, would be negative. Both radical 2 over 2's would be negative. And down here, the cosine, or the x, would be positive. The sine, or the y, would be negative. Let me know if you have any more questions, and I can make another video with all of the actual values incorporated.